Despite the Empire often being portrayed as one united nation, it's important to remember that division is rife among its provinces, and while they will band together in order to face down a particularly menacing greenskin war, chaos horde, or any other major threat, once that's dealt with, they'll go back to bickering among themselves. Some definitely attract controversy easier than others though, such as the Giga Chad Toddy and the topic of today's video, Elspeth Von Draken. Elspeth Von Draken, aka the Dark Lady of Nuln, the Graveyard Rose, and the Goth Mummy of the Warhammer world, is perhaps the most powerful Amethyst sorcerer of her age and a Magesterix of the Amethyst Order. Despite her power, she's not necessarily a beloved figure of the Empire, locked away in her tall black tower on the edges of the Garden of Moor, or a similar tower in the Grey Mountains. For 3 generations she has been the subject of stories that terrify the children of Nuln. The Dark Lady will snatch you up, and I wish she would. Her name is spoken in hushed tones in dingy taverns and the halls of nobility alike. She is a spectre, an ethereal beauty that is distrusted by elector counts and both Supreme Patriarchs Thyrus Gorman and Balthazar Gelt. Luckily, she remains an ally of the Elector Countess of Nuln, Emanuelle von Leibowitz, which means she is at least protected in her home province. The Von Drakens have long been touched by the winds of magic, for ill or for good. Their bloodline has produced both monsters and saviours, which perhaps explains why so many are sceptical of Elspeth's allegiance to the Empire. Her immense power and her family history point to her being capable of extreme good or evil, and it all depends on Elspeth herself. The more elusive she becomes as well, the easier it is to conjure an image of an amethyst wizard who has spent far too much time mastering the purple wind and therefore has become corrupted by it. In reality, Elspeth remains more than loyal to the Empire. She just doesn't really care on socialising. She's a recluse by nature, dividing her time between her 2 towers and searching for magical artefacts. She's always looking to master time and death, experimenting obsessively with both. Over the many years of her life, she has collected a storehouse full of mystical artifacts and lore, which she guards jealously. Hoarding these artifacts hasn't helped improve relations with other members of her college or the wider wizarding community, but thanks to her close relationship with the Cult of Moor, any attempts from Thyrus Gorman and Balthazar Gelt have been unsuccessful in learning anything about the Magesterix. Elspeth has barely aged in the many years of her life, which again just paints her out to be a target for distrust. This has led to suspicions from witch hunters, with some even storming her towers in the hopes to discover dark secrets from the Graveyard Rose. Each of the invaders was repelled, but they were not killed. Instead, they would wake up far from the tower they had tried to break into, unable to speak of anything they may or may not have learned whilst inside. Despite all this suspicion, as I said, Elspeth is not a threat to the Empire. If anything, she's one of its greatest allies. She just doesn't really like showing it publicly. She often seeks out the Empire's enemies and eliminates them, sometimes without even another soul knowing she has done so. When the great Mirehulk Rawbones was devouring whole villages, Elspeth wiped his evil taint from the world. And when the vampire Vashara of Lamia tried to corrupt the Jägersbruck family of Fyldorf and turn their city into a realm of undeath, the creature of the night met her end at Elspeth's hand. Even as the Amethyst Wizard dealt with the undead, that didn't stop some from suspecting her to be a vampire herself. Balthazar Gelt could never act on these suspicions personally, but it was believed that if the 2 powerful wizards followed their paths of seclusion and suspicion, that it would lead to a great conflict between them. Luckily, Elspeth proved herself to be a true ally to the Empire when she took on the Kurgan champion of Nurgle, Tamerkan, at the Battle of Nuln. Prior to this battle, Elspeth appeared in the court of the Countess Emanuelle von Leibowitz. She looked like a spectre of death, dressed in a gown as black as darkness, wielding her pale scythe and Death's Timekeeper. The former is a scythe made almost entirely of shadow, created by Elspeth and bound to her will. The latter is an ancient hourglass, said to contain the remnants of a dead god. It allows Elspeth some control over death and time itself, likely explaining her consistently youthful look despite her being in her 70s. The Dark Lady of Nuln advised her countess not to meet the tides of Nurgle on the open field, and instead argued it would be easier to use the impressive firepower of Nuln against their enemies from the capital city. In the first days of the battle, the Kurgan cavalry was cut down in their thousands by the cannons, volley guns and other artillery at Nuln's disposal. All the while, Elspeth sat atop a tower in the city, watching the conflict from above, mounted on her carmine dragon. That's right, unlike the piddly Pegasus that Balthasar Gelt and other Empire mages ride around on, Elspeth Von Draken has her own dragon. Carmine dragons aren't like your usual fire-breathing lizards either. They're created when a lair becomes so saturated with the wind of death that it creates an incredibly rare and incredibly powerful dragon. Few allow humans to live in their presence, and even fewer would ally with them. So for Elspeth to ride one into battle just shows how strong she is. Elspeth didn't care much for the Kurgans throwing their lives away at Nuln's walls. Her one and only target was Tamarkan himself. As the champion of Nurgle, the Maggot Lord was looking to make himself a demon prince of the Plague Father. As the battle carried on and the number of defenders dwindled, Tamarkan began to enact a ritual that would see the city of Nuln bathed in plague while he ascended to demon royalty. Papa Nurgle sent plenty of his minions to assist Tamarkan in this effort, and the weary Empire troops did their best to hold out against the masses of plague bearers, plague toads, and more. Elspeth chose now as the time to strike burning demons from the world with the fiery breath of her dragon, and leading the men of Nuln in a charge out of the city to stop Tamarkan's ritual. Theodore Bruckner, the Countess of Nuln's headsman and judicial champion, rode out on his demigryph Reaper to meet Tamarkan in single combat. Knowing that Bruckner would not be enough on his own to take down the Maggot Lord, Elspeth gave him the Bale Flame amulet, telling the champion it would protect him in battle and give him an edge against Tamarkan. The final day of the Battle of Nuln was a bloody one. Thousands of knights, warrior priests, foot soldiers and zealots gave their lives so that Bruckner could make his way to Tamarkan unharmed. When he met the Maggot Lord in combat, Bruckner charged forwards, letting his demigryph tear into his flesh with its razor-sharp claws. Unfortunately, Reaper met his end by Tamarkan's axe, but the creature managed to pull the blade away, allowing Bruckner to cleave the flesh from the Maggot Lord's bones and forcing him to reveal his true, disgusting form. Unsurprisingly, with a name like Maggot Lord, beneath his human skin, Tamarkan looked a lot like a giant maggot. Wrapping his horrid flesh around Bruckner, Elspeth's amulet activated, wiping out both Bruckner and Tamarkan in a flash. There was a brief silence before Tamarkan's failed ritual caused oblivion to lash out all over the battlefield and the surrounding area. The children of Nurgle were sent screaming back into the realms of chaos, and many of the human defenders were also caught up in the blast. Lady Elspeth herself and her Carmine dragon fell from the sky, fading away into smoke. Nuln was saved, along with the Empire as a whole, but not without great cost. Elspeth's strategy had caused an incredible loss of life. She was willing to sacrifice thousands of men, leave the lands of Nuln tainted with the touch of Nurgle for generations to come, and even lose her own life in the process. But this is where we see that Elspeth doesn't really care about the journey, only the destination. Throughout her life, she has been deemed a witch, a colluder with the Empire's enemies, and other horrible accusations have been slung her way, and yet she doesn't really care. She does not challenge them, as they simply do not matter to her. Instead, Elspeth just cares about her towers, her artifacts, and keeping the Empire safe. Getting involved with the gossip trains around her doesn't help with any of those, and yet it doesn't prevent the gossip from spreading either. Years after the Battle of Nuln, Elspeth appeared once more in the province. She appeared just as pale and youthful as she had been before the siege, before she spent so much power in defending it from chaos, which only started up the rumour mill once more. Today, it still isn't fully confirmed whether Lady Elspeth Von Draken is or is not connected to the undead, but one thing is clear: she has no intent of betraying the Empire, even if most of its citizens believe she is more than capable of it. There you have it, the story of Warhammer's very own, unachievable, probably on the spectrum, Goth GF. Elspeth Von Draken is a unique character in the Empire, one I do love, not only because of that lovely eyeshadow, but because she shows her loyalty for her country in a vastly different way to most of the other Empire loyalists. Hopefully one day we can see her as a legendary lord in the Total War games, but with CA's recent activity, we can probably expect that lord pack to cost around £100. Thank you for watching. Apologies for this being a shorter video, but I've not had a lot of time to make content recently with being ill, as you can probably tell by the sound of my voice, and some other personal stuff getting in the way. Let me know who or what you want me to cover next, but until then, stay ghouling, ghouls and gals.